welcome back to another episode of the Nursing Now podcast. I'm your host, Janelle McSwiggan, and I am here with Tenley Force. She's a nurse and an author, and she wrote a fun book. It's called New Nursing and the Art of Being Human. So, we're going to be talking about writing today. Tenley, thank you so much for coming on with me today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This is so exciting.
Absolutely. So, can you tell my listeners a little bit more about you and what you do? We've talked a lot about the different types of writing. They know I'm a medical writer, and we also had another nurse author on. But I learned that there's a bunch of different avenues that you can go through for publication and writing. So, can you just tell a little bit about who you are?
Yeah, totally. And I love to hear that. I love to hear about nurses who are embracing different aspects of themselves, especially ones who are passionate about the written word and writing and books. Like, it's so cool to see those like passions merge together. So excited to hear that. Yeah, so I'm Tenley and I have been a registered nurse since 2018. I'm originally from Southern California, but right now I'm in North Carolina for graduate school, which has been like a never-ending journey for me because I love school. I'm one of those. And then, yes, I became a published author back May 2023 is when my book came out. And it has been a really exciting journey since then. A little bit about the project is New is a self-help book primarily for new nurses, but I think that there's definitely richness that the rest of the nursing community can benefit from. And also just like so much wisdom just from nurses that people in general, I think, can learn from. But the point of the book is really to help new nurses hang on to that holistic sense of self as they transition into practice and like that brutal first year of nursing. And so it's not just my perspective in the book, it also includes the perspective of 50 other registered nurses. So 25 new nurses and 25 experienced nurses. So we get that those different perspectives of oh my gosh, I'm new and I'm in the midst of it and I'm overwhelmed. And the wise wisdom of the more experienced nurse being like, here's how I made it through and I'm here to help you. Really with the intention that no new nurse has to go through this process alone.
I absolutely love that. And what a valuable aid. And I was reading that the nurses are from all over the United States as well, too. So it's interesting to hear that you are kind of tackling like different demographics and states with this, because I know nursing, some of it like is a little bit of a cultural thing of like where we're from and how we handle stress. So I could see this being a really helpful thing for new nurses. I'm also hearing that it's kind of once again the opposite of an eat your young type of thing, the support your young. So that's a really beautiful sentiment that you're starting there, Tenley.
You. Yeah, I think I was so surprised just by the acceptance of the community and wanting to join this project and wanting to support those new nurses because we all remember what that feeling was like when we were starting out, and it can be really hard. So
Yeah, if it's one thing I've learned about nurses over the last 2 years, it's that they're so willing to support the community, which again it pushes so far back on that eat your young mentality. Every
yes.
nurse, just about every nurse I've contacted through LinkedIn or just had a brief conversation with, they've been so like warm and community based and willing to answer whatever random questions I have about their specialty or anything like that. So I'm not surprised that nurses were so ready to answer your questions when you asked them.
Yeah, I love our community. That's so awesome.
Yeah, this whole podcast has made me fall in love with our community like again and again. Every new nurse I have on, I'm like, wow, what a beautiful gem that I did not even know about in this world. So yeah, this has been like a really fun experience for me and hopefully for my listeners too.
Oh, definitely. What a resource.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about your journey as a nurse to a published author. What prompted your book?
Yeah, so I actually wrote most of the book in 2019 when I myself was in my new graduate year. And it really kind of came out of a place, kind of a personal desperation, just, feeling those feelings of imposter syndrome and feeling like I'm not measuring up, I'm not good at what I do, I'm not providing good patient care, just like all those feelings, those negative feelings. And really just starting to wonder, am I the only one who feels this way? And then I started asking nurses around me, and it turned out that most of them was like, I have felt that way too. And so that's when I was like, oh, I want to do some research. Like, are there resources out there in terms of like, I guess, self-help books for new nurses. And at the time, there's definitely more now, but at the time there really was a very limited market. So I saw that kind of need and I was like, I don't want any other new nurse to feel like I have to be in bed alone crying at night because I'm the only one that feels this way. It's like, no, you have the community around you. So that's really where the inspiration of the book came from, and kind of definitely turning like kind of my own struggle. I really wanted to turn it into something positive.
Um, I love that. I'm just going to break down what you said. So you saw a need in your own experience and you're kind of like living this experience. And then you started talking to people around you about what their lived experiences were too. So you're doing your market research, you're asking people what they think about the shared experience that you're having. And this is kind of a tough conversation to have, right? Because we're going all the time. And a lot of the time, we don't want to be perceived as the weak nurse that doesn't know what we're doing. A lot of the time, it's we can work like X amount of days without a day off. We can work like whatever amount of hours. We have no problem with it. So these are hard conversations for you to have. And then after you see the need, you saw the market research, you took that market research to a broader area and you saw if there were any competitors, if there was a market available for this, and you saw that there was a market available. So I love to see how people follow their train of thought. And it sounds like it happened so organically for you. And that's kind of how it happened for me as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Um, so can we talk a little bit about your journey to publication? I am just like so fascinated by this. I think it's like a little bit of a mystery. So can you talk a bit more about your publication journey? Because I think you're published from an independent publishing house. Is that right?
Yeah, like a smaller, yeah, indie.
Yeah, can you talk a little bit about that for you and how that went?
Yeah, definitely. I think it can be so intimidating. I feel like when you're a nurse trying something really new, because I feel like, in school you're taught, okay, this is how you become a bedside nurse, and then, okay, this is how you become a nurse manager or a nurse practitioner. And then any deviation from that, it's like what do I do? So it definitely I had to do a lot of research on my own end, kind of starting from square one and being like, okay, like what is publishing? Like what is writing? Like I don't know anything. Like like totally from a fresh perspective. But I think that that is a gift that nursing gives you, is that you're put into a new situation and you simply have to be like, okay, here I am. I got to figure it out. I got to be creative. I got to know, I got to do my research. I got to know what resources there are. And then also being willing to ask for help. I think that that's one of the biggest themes I found in the interviews I did for my book. And so just, asking any author that I knew for help, like sending messages, sending emails, watching YouTube videos, it's just like, to teach myself like what the heck is going on with publishing. So I found that there's really three routes. There's independent, like you were just talking about. Then there's like the indie kind of smaller publishing scene, which is the way I went. And then there's like, the big publishing houses that are like massive, like kind of conglomerations. And they each avenue definitely has its value. And it kind of just depends on what your priorities are, how much creative liberties you want. Because with independent publishing, it's yours. It's your baby. You have final say on everything. I feel like with independent publishers, it's much more of a collaboration where you get to work together. But it is a little bit of a back and forth. Definitely, because they're giving you input, you're giving them input. But it's nice to have someone with expertise. Like I was like, I don't want to have to go get my own copyright and ISBN number. Like I don't want to do the paperwork. Like I want to write. I want to be the fun side. And then, if you want to go with the bigger publishing house side, typically you have to go through what's called a literary agent who represents you kind of like a talent, like acting agent would, to the big publishing houses. So that way it is possible, but it just takes longer. I think is more expensive. And so my priority was, the longer I wait to publish this book, like the more little baby nurses are like, again, crying themselves to sleep at night. And like, I want this book out so that they can get it. into their hands and feel supported and encouraged. So that's kind of my priority. I had the book here. I also really wanted to make sure that this was the specific cover art, which again is a little surprise in chapter 1 about what this is. It's by an artist called Blacklight King. He's from Los Angeles, based in California. Um, and is actually a graffiti artist, so this and painter. So it's like really cool fusion. But yeah, so that's where my priority came in. It definitely helped too with, getting an editor and proofreaders because it's like I can only do so much, and I've never been very good at grammar. So that guidance and that help, and having someone to be able to ask questions of, I think was helpful for me because I on my own, I was like, I don't think I'm organized enough to do the totally independent route.
It's so inspiring to hear that you were able to do this just figuring it out from like YouTube videos and figuring out like the three major channels that you can go through. I think that's really inspiring for a lot of people that have no clue um what the routes are. I always say that like we all have to start somewhere, and like one of my mottos is if I can do it, like you can do it, because I didn't have any experience in my medical
Yeah.
writing niche either, and I figured it out. So it's helpful to hear that other people also didn't like start at the top. We all like kind of figured it out like through Google and YouTube videos.
Yes. And then you meet people along the way, and it's so cool, like getting to connect with other like nurse authors on Instagram. It's like there's actually a whole community of people out there doing this. And it's definitely more niche, but once you kind of make those connections, it's again that feeling of community that I think is just like so powerful.
Yeah, it breaks wide open. I remember the first time I met a nurse writer, and like I said, I'm like more technical, like boring stuff.
No, I'm sure it's awesome.
Honestly, I love it. I super love it.
So
But the first
good.
time I met someone with that title, I was like, I've never heard of this title. And now, like, there's so many people I know with that title. And I don't think it's become more popular. I think I just kind of like broke my way into like a little pocket of people that I didn't even know existed,
Yeah.
which has been so helpful and so nice to share like your wins and your frustrations along the way and just ask questions with other people.
Oh, definitely. Yes, I feel like it's helpful in nursing to have like a nurse that's a little bit ahead of you to like kind of show you the ropes, and then also a nurse that's a little bit behind you that like you can show the ropes, and we're all kind of like, going along. And I think that's the same thing with nurse writing, kind of as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially on social media. You're talking about Instagram. Are there a lot of nurse authors on links on Instagram? I haven't spent a lot of time on that platform.
Yeah, definitely more kind of short form writing, like you're talking about, like more articles, blogging, writing content for other like health publications. Definitely more of that. There's a small handful, I think, of nurses that I've seen write books, predominantly nonfiction. I don't really know what the fiction scene looks like per se, but it's exciting. I think it's just really exciting to watch nurses really find their voice. And it's like, patient stories are so important, but it's like our stories are just as important. And not necessarily in terms of like how we relate to just patients, but like how we relate to like the world and like life and how we navigate that. I think nurses offer such a huge perspective. So I feel like anytime a nurse like shares a story about themselves, I'm like, I just love it. I feel so inspired. So mhm.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that the healthcare system is definitely focused on patients, and it obviously should be, right? Like that is the basis of our healthcare system. But
Yes.
along the way, we lose a lot of the culture of the different roles taking care of the patients, including
Yeah.
nurses. So to hear that nurses are writing books and sharing their thoughts and like wanting to mentor newer nurses through books is just such a cool movement to hear about. So yeah, it's an
Yeah,
exciting time. It kind of makes you think like, where is this going 5 years from now? Is this like
definitely.
just the crest of a new wave? So yeah, super exciting. So you mentioned that the traditional larger publishing houses use literary agents. For smaller independent publishing companies, do you pitch your ideas? Sometimes for like blogs and articles, editors will give us content, and then sometimes we pitch content to them. So do you ever like pitch books, or do you come with a complete book? How does that work?
Yeah, that's a great question because I feel like that's like like the small details, that's where it becomes like, oh my gosh, like it kind of feels like trudging. I feel you're like, okay, like I've embarked on this hike and I've gotten this far, and now I'm like, yeah, really having to wade through some stuff. Yeah, so traditionally, I'm not sure about like all indie publishers, but a good thing to have on hand is something called a query letter, and it's kind of like a cover letter. And you could just like Google this, like query letter, and you'll find really great examples. Like there's writers out there that like literally have how-to guides about this. So it's like you will find support, like I promise. But kind of like a cover letter, but instead of, trying to like get a job, it's you're pitching yourself as an author, and then you're also pitching your book, and you're kind of like, here's why, you should pick me as an author, kind of putting that best foot forward. So you write a query letter. Some publishers will also want you to put together a like a book proposal, and that's like a little bit of a thicker kind of like packet. And again, there's so many options online to see like what that looks like. And then also some publishers will tell you exactly what they want in the query letter, exactly what they want in the book proposal. So it's like you don't have to go in blind. And in the book proposal, it's again like a synopsis of your book, kind of like who the target audience is for, what need this book is filling, how it compares to what's already like compares and contrasts to what is already on the market. And so that can be a daunting task, but I think that it really makes you get to know yourself and your story, whatever it is, like so intimately. So those are kind of the two things in terms of paperwork that you kind of want to submit forward. And so with smaller publishers, like you can just pitch to them a lot of times. Like you can send in stuff. It's like we talked about earlier, the bigger publishers, that's where you have to be represented. Like you can't just be like, here is my information. And so I did it a little bit backwards in that I had finished my book. Not in terms of editing, but like I had a complete draft of like, here you go, publisher, like check this out. You actually can pitch just an idea if it's a really good idea and you've kind of fleshed it out. You can start there. You can start with like a partial book, a chapter. It's kind of like a little bit all over the place. And again, depending on who the publisher is, they will tell you the requirements. So it's not just like a blind guessing game. It's like, oh, just follow their instructions and you can submit kind of according to that. So, and then what's cool about social media, and I think indie publishers, is a lot of times they will advertise like when they're accepting new authors, or they'll have like a contact person that you can just reach out to. And so, some will say we don't respond to every query, but then some of them do. So it kind of just depends. But I think I like that intimacy of it's like, you're not lost in a sea of thousands and thousands and thousands of books. Like you are communicating with people who are really passionate still about like books and stories, and not just about like how many copies can we sell, So
Yeah, that's a nice collaborative theme. So is there like a list of publishers? Like, can you just Google publishers that take health content ideas, or like how do you figure out where to pitch for publishing houses?
yeah, that's a great question. Again, like on social media, I think once you start following more authors, I think especially smaller authors, you can kind of be like, okay, like, well, who was their publisher? Like, what route did they go down? Or like, if you have a favorite book, you're like, okay, well, like, how did they go about it, and who did they connect with? And kind of finding, I wouldn't say like, like okay, like Michelle Obama's like autobiography, like that's like some top tier, like that is, but if you find smaller authors who maybe just are starting out themselves and then kind of seeing where they started. There's also like I'm thinking I was living near Los Angeles for a long time, and like there's like the LA Festival of Books and stuff like that where there's community events that come together, where sometimes you can meet other authors and kind of hear their stories, hear who they're with, and things like that. So, and then again, like a Google search is always your best friend, I feel, in that journey too.
Yeah, you know what? I live in the middle of nowhere, New Hampshire, literally
Oh,
farmland. I pass a whole bunch of cows to get to the main road, and we even have a really small like author festival out here now that I'm thinking of it.
oh,
So, I'm
So
sure,
cool.
yeah, I'm sure if my very, very small town has it, there's a lot of other author, I guess, networking opportunities near other, I guess, more popular areas.
Yes. And I'm sure like even like going to like local bookstores too, I'm sure there's like some sort of like chit chat happening, like maybe there's a flyer, maybe there's an advertisement. So it's just really kind of being like eagle eye looking out too and making connections and kind of
Yeah,
all that.
yeah, absolutely. Those like smaller bookstores especially are always, I feel like, hubs for community. I feel like there's always like authors reading, that type of thing.
Yes.
So I could definitely see that being a spot for that. That's really interesting. Thanks for sharing your thought process around that too.
Yeah.
Super helpful. So you had an idea, you brought it to the right people, and you did a ton of research along the way. So you're really committed to this. How did you know your topic was profitable? Or were you like, I am so passionate about this and I just want to get it out there and help people? And it can't like it's not either or, I'm sure as well, but where's your frame of mind of that? And how did you have any inkling on profitability?
Yeah, so it's definitely scary because, being a nurse, there's a lot more of like a fallback. And then being an author, you're like on this adventure that is totally uncharted. And so you never know. You never know, I think with writing. So it's definitely a vulnerable feeling, putting yourself out there and all this. But I think I really tried to keep four things in mind. And I actually did a little like Instagram video about this some months back, but kind of keeping in mind like if you want to embark on a writing journey, you want to keep, yeah, the four things in mind. So you want to keep in mind what you're passionate about in terms of like what you love, like what lights up your life, like what can you talk about for hours on end. Um, kind of keeping your passion in main focus. And then second, kind of thinking about like what do you hate? And I don't mean hate in like the bad sense of the word, but like if you were gonna like go protest on the street about an issue, like what would that issue be? And so kind of holding those two things, like the love and the hate kind of in tandem. Um, and then third, thinking about your like audience, but in a really to start in a small scale. Like if you could write for one person, who would that one person be? And for me, it was like that little crying baby nurse. And like, what do I love? I love nurses. What do I hate? I hate that new nurses have to go through such a grueling process. And then my audience was like that one little baby nurse. And then the fourth is kind of like we talked about, then doing your market research and being like, is there a need here? Like, what kind of gaps do we have in the community that people aren't really speaking into yet? Like, are there gaps? Or maybe there's no gaps, but like you could say something you feel like a little bit better, a little bit more fleshed out. So kind of keeping those four things in mind, I think that actually will give you a lot of direction. And I think that the one of the biggest hurdles is just feeling intimidated and too intimidated to start or too intimidated to, put your work out there. So I feel like definitely, I think even like in nursing, like especially when you first start out, you can be your own biggest enemy, being like, again, like I'm not good enough, I'm not this. And I think that that transfers to writing too if you're not careful. And so you really have to um, reel yourself in and then also have people around you to tell you, no, like you definitely can do this. You have something important to say, and to have people to like remind you like what's good and true about you so you can really keep going on this journey when you even discourage yourself sometimes.
And I think it's so hard when you're a nurse trying something new, right? Because we have the traditional sense of nursing so deeply embedded in us that we almost think that like being an author isn't quite for us because we didn't go to school and we didn't have like a literary
Right.
degree, particularly in that we weren't trained in the written word and we are nurses and that's like outside of our scope. So
Totally.
I
Outside
feel
of your
like,
scope. Yeah, I like that.
yeah,
Really what it is.
yes. And if you have people in the publishing industry that can support you and provide good feedback when you're feeling down about yourself, you can be more successful on that path.
Yeah, and especially knowing that like editors and proofreaders exist for a reason. Like it's a profession, its own profession for a reason. So it's like there are resources to take second, third, fourth looks. If you're really concerned like me, like I'm like, wait, what are the like rules about commas again? I'm like, wait a minute. Like I have the content there, but like some of the details on the grammar is like a little shaky. So there's I think that's, like in nursing, it's like all members of the team are so crucial. It's like we have the respiratory therapist, we have the telemetry people watching the monitors, we have all these people. And I think in publishing too, it's like there's different little specialties. So being able to rely on the different members of your team to get like, well, I guess in writing, it's the product out, in nursing, it's keep the patient safe, but there's a lot of overlap.
Yeah, I love that example. Do you have any best advice for nurses listening out there who want to become published authors? What would you say to them?
Yeah, I think like I was mentioning before, just like how important nurse stories are. I feel like because we get to see life in such a unique way, like we see the worst parts and the best parts. And I think, for better or for worse, nursing really changes you as a person. And like I always say, if you're not careful, it makes your bad qualities worse. But if you really lean into the process of growth, it makes your good qualities better. And then also gives you just like all these great, skill sets of like, I can be calm in a crisis. I can think critically. I can problem solve. I can do all these things. And so I think that nurses just have so much to offer in terms of just the way that we perceive life and love and death and just all of these things. And so I think, again, it's a matter of not getting inside your own head, being like, well, I can't do this. I've never done this before. But it's like, if you can be a nurse, you literally can do so many things. And so it's just really taking those skills that you have as a nurse and kind of reformatting them in a new way, in a new kind of skill set and like, creativity. That's like a huge part of nursing. And so you can transfer that creativity and kind of like, the endurance you found in nursing, you can transfer that. Like these are all transferable skills. And again, this is just the stories that nurses have to tell are so important. And I think that the world just really needs to hear it. And whether it be, I think it's like a little step up, not just journaling, but really, I think telling your story and the stories that you've gone through and the experiences that you've had, it's just is beneficial to all of us. Like anytime I hear of a nurse writer, I'm like, I want to hear your story. Like, wait a minute. Like, I want to like tell me your story. I think that's so important. And I think like, like you're saying, I think our community is definitely on a precipice of really coming together in new ways that we haven't before. And I think that sharing our collective stories is a way that we can really like come together and get to know each other and really strengthen our community as a whole. So nurses, tell your stories. It's so important. Don't let grammar or the newness of it all stop you. I think that would be my final advice.
I wholeheartedly agree. I think that we're such a strong community for all the reasons that you said. I think we also might be slightly trauma bonded to each other
Yes.
because no one knows what we've gone through besides like
Oh,
us, other
true.
healthcare workers, and maybe our patients who might be unconscious for half the time anyway, so we don't really experience it. But either way, it's made us very strong as a community. Um, I talk all the time about transferable skills and how nurses are exceptional business owners and incredible
Yes.
writers from their time management, prioritization, a bunch of other skills. And grammar is not one that you need to be super strong with.
Oh my
Yeah,
gosh, not at all.
yeah, if you can like link together a sentence, if you can write a 5 paragraph essay with like an intro and a conclusion, like you kind of know what those are. Editors are incredible people, and I am so grateful for my editors all the time. I always say that they like polish up my pieces and make them just so beautiful. So if you're not the strongest writer, but you have a story to tell, don't put off writing a book or think that you're not worthy of writing a book because you absolutely can. There's people that can help you every step of the way on this journey. So I think it's really important just to like keep that in mind.
Yeah, just like in nursing, it's like you're never alone. Like there's people you can turn to always.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, Tenley Force, thank you so much for coming on with me today. And your new book, or your book is called New Nursing in the Art of Being Human.
Yes.
We'll have all the
Hold it up.
links. Yes, thank you. We'll have all the links in the show notes. This was a really fun conversation. Thank you very much for
Yes.
sharing your
Thank you for
insight.
having me. This is so much fun.
Absolutely. This has been your Nursing Minute.